mention James a lot because I really enjoy his insights. So thank you. And maybe this is what we're going to do with you. Okay. Thank you. Good question. We have a question for Dustin, from Dustin. And it's one of those questions that's always, is always tough for me, but let's answer it. And the reason these questions are tough, they're asking my experience or my opinion. It's your opinion, man, on an exercise. And it's always difficult to answer these questions because very often I did these exercises 4 decades ago and tossed them out because they didn't work then. But we've come a long way since then, and maybe the techniques are better. But let's go. What is your experience with the Nordic hamstring curl? It's funny, it's called that now. Do you believe it can reduce hamstrings injuries? Who knows? How would you program it? What do you believe are some great exercises for strengthening hamstrings and reducing hamstring injuries? Now, that's a totally different question, and I like answering that one. So my experience with, we used to call these sprinter curls. Now, this takes us back a long ways. They're not new. The Russians were the Soviets were doing these a long time ago. I know that the 72 gold medalist Borzov, who wouldn't have won if the American coach could read a time schedule. That's a terrible story, but here we go. Borzov did these. He did a lot of it. It was funny for a while there in the mid 70s. Everyone would, no matter what Borzov did, people thought it was the second. He meditates. That's why he ran the 100 meters faster than anybody else. And he also did a lot of other stuff too. But back then we called the sprinters curl. And then we also started seeing the Soviets. They were doing, so follow this. You got the sprinters curl, the Nordic curl. And then we also started seeing a lot of the Soviets doing hyperextensions. And I did them, and I still think that the hyperextension is one of the least appreciated exercises there are. I haven't had a system set up for a while. And once we started doing the hyperextension, somebody came back from a tour of the Soviet Union and said, actually, they're combining the hyperextension with the sprinter's curl and an exercise called the glute ham raise. And I worked with Bigger, Faster, Stronger, and BFS was one of the first companies, I think anyway, to really push this GHR, the glute ham raise. And what was interesting is that the Upper Limit Gym, which was a BFS thing, we really started to push that, and the number of injuries in the hamstring area just went through the roof. There was a time, oh gosh, it would be on the cusp of 1990, somewhere around there, where it was kind of funny to see us all pulling our hamstrings doing exercises that were designed to stop us from pulling hamstrings. So to follow, we went sprinter's curl to hyper. Sprinter's curls didn't work for us because we just didn't get any value. Hyper we loved. The GHR caused a lot of problems. And now the Nordic curl or the sprinter's curl has kind of come back again. Do I like them? Not necessarily. I still think for the bulk of the people you're ever going to work with, you're looking on sprinters curls, there's probably on the planet Earth, maybe 2,000 people is going to help. Well, and it's not going to help the other 8 billion. Now, for those 2,000 people, there's great value. Okay, maybe. For hamstring issues, I'm still old school on that. The best combination I ever found, now I don't have this machine, but I always liked the old-fashioned leg curl. And the reason I liked the old-fashioned leg curl is it allowed us to train that leg bicep family, like the bicep. It's funny, we call it, there's a lot of us still call them the leg bicep, but there's actually, I think there's 3. It doesn't matter. But that curl, it allows you to play with reps. One of my favorite things to do is Art Vaney's idea. You do a set of 15 with a light weight, nice and slow. You go a little bit heavier without moving. You stay there, a little heavier, and you do about a set of 8, and then you go as heavy as you can and do a fast set of 4. I like that because it always felt like, to me, how the hamstring seems to work under fatigue out on the field of play. You're fine, and then it starts to burn. when I was young, the answer to all hamstring questions was the straight leg, stiff leg deadlift, and the leg curl. I know that the straight leg deadlift and the leg curl have really fallen out of favor, but you know, I know in my own personal experience that combination seemed to really open things up. The question is this: well, how would I program the Nordic hamstring curls? Well, I wouldn't. I would never use them. That's me. I'm not a bad person, and I'm sure there's gonna be people, you know, very often in the comments, right? Well, yeah, I use them all the time, and good for you. I do all these things in training that I would never necessarily recommend to, you know, blankly to every person on the planet Earth. You know, squat snatches, they're not recommended for everybody, you know. So I wouldn't program it at all. But here's the thing. What do you believe are some great exercise for strengthening hamstrings and reducing hamstring injuries? I still think that deep front squats are the answer to almost all leg related training issues. Now, the brilliant exercise called the goblet squat, invented by probably the finest person in the history of the world. But the goblet squat, with how it teaches that hip mobility and it teaches a sit between, there's great value in that. And the double kettlebell front squat, which I often teach very quickly to young people because we instantly can add load and we're taking the wrists out of the issue. One of the things I get a lot of complaints and feedback on are the soreness of the hamstrings, which is something that makes me like it. And then, of course, when we move up to the barbell front squat, I really like that for a hamstring exercise. And the key is you have to go deep. And now what deep means is look at someone's goblet squat position and to see if they can get close to that in their barbell front squat position. You'll hear phrases like ass to grass all the time, and I'm fine with that, but frankly, not all of us are built to do that. Where, you know, my deep front squat position. And by the way, when I clean heavy, I go much deeper than when I front squat because the load crashes me in a weightlifting meet deeper than I can under my own control in the weight room, which is probably a scary thought. But for me, it would be the family of exercises that you'd probably want to do, obviously, are the squat and the hinge family. So fairly deep, appropriate squats, goblet, double kettlebell front squat, front squat. For those of you who know my work, you'll notice I've ignored the overhead squat because for a lot of people, that isn't necessarily a hamstring. It's not a lower body exercise. It's a whole body mobility test. And then, of course, the whole deadlift family done correctly. You know, I was there when Nico Vlad was doing those Romanian deadlifts at the Olympic Training Center. And it took me years to figure out what he was doing that for. And the Romanian deadlift might be by itself the best, again, done correctly, might be the best hamstring, lower back, butt exercise I know. Oddly, so if you can do it right, I have a weird exercise called the Bulgarian goat bag swing. That's also a wonderful hamstring exercise, but I can't necessarily. Just look at the videos and see if you can use it. So the squat family, appropriate deadlifts. And I just gotta say this because this is the feedback I'm getting from my inner circle and some of my friends. The glute loop hip thrust seems to do marvelous things for the hamstring. And all I can tell you is that the human body is a lot more complicated than we think, but somehow working the glutes hard seems to do magic for the hamstrings. So that would be the thing I would recommend in a way that I can't necessarily prove why it works, but it works from people's experience. And I've also picked up my own experience doing the half kneeling kettlebell press. Seems to do, you know, wonders for my hips. And if I do light kettlebell presses before a walk, my legs feel better. So, and by the way, when it comes to legs and lower back, if an exercise makes you feel better, that's money. I don't know if it's just some kind of prophylactic or what, or just some kind of it's some brain trick. I don't care. It works for me. So, best exercises for the hamstrings, in my opinion, we're back to the hinge and squat family. If you want to build the hamstrings, make sure you go deep. Get a view of take a picture of what you look like at the bottom of a goblet squat. Try to do the same thing with either double kettlebell front squat or barbell front squat. Try to achieve that same position. From my experience, sorry about that. From my experience, that's just a game changer. When it comes to the hinge family, a lot of people have said that high rep kettlebell swings seem to stretch out the hamstring better than anything they've ever done. I found that to be true too. The deadlift family, again, done correctly, seems to be magic for the hamstring.